Commander Jake Harrison walked across the bridge of his ship and tried not to show how angry he felt. Through the main window, he could see hundreds of alien warships floating in space around them. Each one looked like it could destroy his vessel. Without breaking a sweat, the U's Resilient was not much to look at. Her hull had patches of different colored metal welded over holes and damage from years of hard use. The weapons were old kinetic cannons that most militaries had stopped using decades ago. When the shields turned on, they flickered like a dying light bulb because the power core was too weak to run them properly. Jake had commanded cargo ships for 15 years before the war started. The Resilient used to carry supplies between colonies and mining stations. She was tough and reliable, but she was never meant to fight in battles against advanced alien war machines. 6 months ago, Earth had joined the Galactic Defense Coalition. Every other species brought their finest military ships to the Alliance. The Zephyrians contributed vessels made of living crystal that could cut through asteroids with pure energy. The Thorcan Empire sent massive dreadnoughts covered in plasma cannons. Even the peaceful Mexari had ships with shields strong enough to stop attacks from small moons. Humanity sent the Resilient. She was the only military ship Earth could spare that was actually capable of traveling between star systems. Everything else was either broken, too old to leave the solar system, or still under construction in orbital shipyards that might not finish their work for another 5 years. Lieutenant Amy Carter stood at the tactical station, her jaw clenched, as she listened to the radio chatter between the other ships. The alien crews were not trying to hide their opinions about the human contribution to the fleet. "Sir, they are talking about us again," she said quietly. "The Velinari are calling us the weak link. The Thorcan captains are betting on how fast we will run away when the real fighting starts." Jake nodded but said nothing. He had heard worse during his years hauling freight through pirate territory. At least these aliens were not shooting at him yet. Admiral Kextar of the Velinari Empire had visited the Resilient 3 days ago to inspect the human ship. The insectoid alien had 4 eyes that seemed to glow with amusement as he looked around the cramped bridge. His mandibles clicked together in what Jake realized was laughter. "This is what the humans offer to our great alliance?" The Admiral had said, his translator making his voice sound like grinding metal. "A garbage scow that should have been melted down for scrap years ago?" Jake had kept his mouth shut during that inspection, but it had taken all his self-control. He wanted to tell the alien that this garbage scow had survived pirate attacks, asteroid storms, and corporate wars while hauling cargo across half the galaxy. The Resilient might not look pretty, but she had never let her crew down. Chief Engineer Ron Kelly approached the command chair, wiping grease off his hands with an old rag. He was a thin man in his 50s who could fix anything with enough time and spare parts. He had kept the Resilient running through situations that should have killed them all. "Captain, they have put us at the back of the formation," Ron said in a low voice. "Dead last. They do not even want us in the main battle line when we attack the Devourers. The Devourers were why they were all here. The ancient machine race had awakened from somewhere near the center of the galaxy and started consuming entire star systems. Their ships turned planets into raw materials and used the energy to build more ships. 3 systems had already gone dark, and the Coalition was humanity's first chance to prove they belonged among the galactic powers. Navigator Lisa Brooks looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. She was young, maybe 25, and this was her first military assignment. She had joined the crew because she wanted to see the stars, not because she wanted to fight in a war that might end civilization. "Captain, the Velinari are broadcasting on open channels," she said, her voice shaking. "They are calling us the Charity Case. Some of the other ships are taking bets on how long we will last before we turn around and go home." Jake walked to the main viewport and stared out at the alien fleet. Each ship represented hundreds of years of military tradition and technology that humans could barely understand. The Zephyrian vessels hummed with energy that made the space around them shimmer. The Thorkin dreadnoughts were covered in armor plating thick enough to build cities on. The Nexari ships moved without any visible engines, powered by forces that human scientists were still trying to figure out. The Resilient had duct tape, holding some of her outer hull panels in place. Her main computer was older than some of the crew members. The artificial gravity only worked on half the ship, and the other half used magnetic boots and safety lines. "Let them laugh," Jake said quietly, but loud enough for his crew to hear. "We did not come here to impress anyone. We came here to fight." Communications Officer Paul Martinez turned from his station with a grim expression. He was a veteran who had served on 3 different ships before joining the Resilience crew. "Sir, we are getting the final mission briefing from Coalition. Command, the attack on the Erebus system begins in 3 days. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The Erebus system was where the largest Devourer hive ship had been spotted. Intelligence reports said the machine vessel was the size of a small moon and was slowly consuming the last inhabited planet in the system. If the Coalition could not stop it there, the Devourers would have enough resources to build a fleet that could threaten every world in the galaxy. "Pass the word to all stations," Jake ordered. "I want every system checked and double-checked. We may not have the fanciest ship in this fleet, but we are going to do our job." Amy Carter looked at him with something like pride in her eyes. "Sir, what exactly is our job?" "The mission briefing just says we are supposed to provide support." Jake smiled for the first time in days, though it was not a happy expression. "Our job, Lieutenant, is to survive long enough to matter. The other species think we are dead weight, but they are about to learn something about humans that they do not teach in their fancy military academies." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not come back. Earth's government had made it clear that this was humanity's chance to prove they belonged in galactic civilization. Failure was not an option, even if success seemed impossible. Through the viewport, Jake could see the alien ships beginning to move into jump formation. Soon they would all leap through hyperspace to face an enemy that had already destroyed 3 star systems. The Coalition's finest warships would lead the charge, their advanced weapons and shields giving them confidence. The Resilient would follow behind, ignored and dismissed by her allies. But Jake had a feeling that before this war was over, the galaxy would learn to respect the ship they called weak. The Coalition fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Erebus system, and Jake felt his blood turn to ice. The intelligence reports had not prepared them for what they were seeing. The Devourer hive ship was not just big. It was massive. Beyond anything he had ever imagined. The machine vessel stretched across space like a dark metal cancer. It was easily 3 kilometers long and almost as wide. Its surface was covered with spikes, weapon ports, and strange geometric patterns. That hurt to look at directly. Smaller Devourer ships moved around it like insects around a hive, their black hulls seeming to absorb light itself. "Dear God," whispered Paul Martinez from the communications station. His face had gone pale as he stared at the tactical display. "That thing is the size of a small moon." Lieutenant Amy Carter was running sensor sweeps as fast as her equipment would allow. "Sir, I am counting over 200 smaller vessels around the hive ship. Each one is at least as big as a Thorkin cruiser." Jake gripped the arms of his command chair and tried to stay calm. He had seen pirates, corporate battle fleets, and asteroid miners armed with military surplus weapons, but this was different. The Devourers were not just another enemy. They were death itself, given form and purpose. Admiral Kekstar's voice crackled over the fleet communications channel. "All vessels, maintain formation. We will execute coordinated strikes on the hive ship's primary power cores." The humans will remain in reserve and provide support as needed. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew it would be pointless. The Resilient took her position at the back of the formation, while the Coalition's finest ships moved into attack positions. The plan was simple and direct. Hit the Hive ship with everything they had and cripple it before it could fully deploy. Its forces. The battle began with a display of firepower that would have impressed the gods themselves. Zephyrian energy beams carved through space like swords made of pure light. Thorkin plasma cannons lit up the darkness with balls of superheated gas that could melt through asteroid rock. Nexari shield ships created barriers of force that protected the attacking vessels from return fire. For the first few minutes, Jake thought they might actually win. The Coalition ships were working together like parts of a well-oiled machine. Their weapons were finding targets and doing damage. The smaller Devourer vessels were falling back toward the Hive ship, apparently surprised by the intensity of the attack. Then everything went wrong. The surface of the Hive ship opened up like a flower made of metal and death. Weapon systems that defied understanding rose from hidden bays and began firing. But these were not normal weapons. Jake watched in horror as gravity itself seemed to bend around some of the Coalition ships, yanking them out of formation and sending them spinning helplessly through space. "Sir, the Zephyrian squadron is reporting total system failures." "Amy," Carter called out, her voice tight with shock. "Some kind of electromagnetic pulse just shut down their entire fleet." Other Coalition ships were having their own problems. The advanced shields that had protected them from conventional weapons were useless against whatever the Devourers were using. Jake watched ship after ship go dark on the tactical display as mysterious forces disabled their power systems. "The Velinary flagship is down," reported Paul Martinez. "Admiral Kekstar's ship just went completely dark. I am not getting any response from them." The worst part was the swarms. Hidden bays all over the Hive ship were opening and releasing clouds of smaller Devourer vessels. They moved like metal wasps, surrounding the Coalition ships and cutting off their escape routes. Each one was only the size of a fighter craft, but there were thousands of them. Chief Engineer Ron Kelly appeared on the bridge, his face grim. "Captain, I have been monitoring the other ships' distress signals. The Devourers are not just destroying them. They are boarding them and taking the crews." Jake felt sick. The intelligence reports had mentioned that the Devourers consumed organic life to power their machines, but seeing it happen was different from reading about it in files. "All ships, this is Acting Fleet Commander Zolther," came a panicked transmission from one of the surviving Thorkin vessels. "Execute emergency withdrawal. The mission is a complete failure. Repeat, all ships retreat immediately." But there was nowhere to run. The swarms of smaller Devourer ships had surrounded the entire Coalition fleet. Their jamming was preventing hyperspace jumps, and conventional engines were not fast enough to escape the trap. Jake watched the tactical display with growing horror as ship after ship was overwhelmed. The Zephyrian vessels, with all their advanced energy weapons, were helpless against enemies that seemed to adapt to every attack. The massive Thorkin dreadnoughts were too slow to avoid the gravity traps that caught them like flies in amber. Even the Nexari shields were failing under focused fire from weapons that learned and evolved with each shot. "Captain," Chief Kelly said quietly, "we are the only ship they have not targeted yet. I think they are saving us for last." Jake realized the engineer was right. The Resilient was still floating at the back of the formation, ignored by the Devourers who were systematically destroying every other vessel in the fleet. Maybe they thought the human ship was too weak to bother with. Maybe they wanted to watch the humans panic as their allies died around them. Navigator Lisa Brooks was crying as she watched the destruction on her screens. "Sir, the Nexari hospital." Ship just went silent. They had over 3,000 wounded aboard. Jake looked around his bridge crew. These were good people who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return home. Amy Carter met his eyes and nodded slightly. She understood what he was thinking, even though it seemed impossible. The Coalition fleet was dying around them. Ships that had taken centuries to build and represented the finest military technology in the galaxy were being torn apart like paper dolls. The aliens who had dismissed the resilient as worthless were now paying the price for their arrogance, but the humans were still alive. Their weak, patched-together cargo hauler was still functional while the galaxy's finest warships burned and died. Jake made a decision that would have seemed insane to any rational person. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "Our allies are counting on us. I know we are not the fastest ship or the strongest ship in this fleet, but we are still here, and we are still fighting. All crew to battle stations." Amy Carter began powering up the Resilient's ancient weapon systems. "Sir, what are your orders?" Jake stood up from his command chair and walked to the main viewport. The Devourer hive ship loomed ahead of them like a mechanical mountain. Around it, the last few Coalition vessels were fighting desperate battles they could not win. "We are going to do what humans do best," Jake said grimly. "We are going to survive when everyone else thinks we should be dead. And then we are going to make these machines regret the day they decided to threaten our friends." The Resilient, scorned and dismissed by her allies, began moving forward into the chaos of battle. Behind them, the wreckage of the Coalition's mighty fleet drifted in space like broken dreams. But ahead of them was something the Devourers had never encountered before: humans who refused to give up, no matter how hopeless things looked. Jake stared at the burning remains of the Coalition fleet and felt something click in his mind. The other species had fought this battle like they were taught in their military schools. They had used formation attacks, coordinated strikes, and advanced technology. The Devourers had been ready for all of it, but humans had learned warfare in a different kind of school. They had learned it in back alleys and asteroid fields, fighting pirates and corporate armies with whatever they could find. Jake had spent 15 years keeping his ship alive in situations where the smart thing would have been to surrender. "Carter, shut down our main power grid," Jake ordered. His tactical officer stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Sir, that will leave us completely defenseless." "No, it will make us invisible." "Ron, I need you to reroute everything through backup systems. Make us look like floating junk." Chief Engineer Ron Kelly's eyes lit up with understanding. "The old playing dead trick. We used to do that when asteroid pirates got too close to our cargo runs." The Resilient went dark. Her engines stopped humming, her weapons powered down, and even her running lights went out. To anyone watching, she looked like just another piece of wreckage from the destroyed Coalition ships. Jake watched through the viewport as Devourer vessels moved past them without stopping. The machine ships were focused on hunting down the last few active Coalition vessels. They completely ignored what appeared to be another dead Hulk drifting among the debris. "Paul, are you picking up any signals from survivors?" Jake whispered. "Communications." Officer Paul Martinez nodded grimly. "Scattered groups on 17 different ships, sir. They are trapped in sealed compartments, but they are still alive. Then we are going to get them out. Lisa, plot a course through the debris field. We are going to do this the human way." Navigator Lisa Brooks looked confused. "What exactly is the human way, sir?" Jake smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Low, dirty, and completely crazy." What happened next was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of charging in with guns blazing, the Resilient became a ghost ship. She used the wreckage of destroyed vessels as cover, moving from one piece of debris to another like a submarine hiding in an underwater canyon. Devourers had advanced sensors that could detect energy signatures from across a star system. But they were not designed to find a ship that was pretending to be space junk. Jake's crew had grown up watching old Earth movies about submarine warfare and guerrilla fighters. They knew how to hide in plain sight, Lieutenant. Amy Carter used the ship's old kinetic cannons in ways their designers never intended. Instead of firing at enemy ships, she shot at pieces of debris, creating clouds of metal fragments that confused Devourer's sensors. The ancient weapons were perfect for the job because they did not give off the energy signatures that more advanced weapons would have produced. "We have got contact with a group of Velinari survivors," reported Paul Martinez. "Their ship is dead, but they have 20 people alive in an emergency shelter." Jake nodded. "Ron, get the cargo bay ready for rescue operations. Make it look like natural debris on the outside." Chief Engineer Ron Kelly had been busy while they talked. He had welded pieces of scrap metal to their cargo bay doors, making them look like random chunks of wreckage. When the bay opened, it would appear to be just another hole in a piece of destroyed ship. The rescue was terrifying and perfect at the same time. The Resilient drifted close to the wrecked Velinari vessel, looking like another piece of floating junk. Her cargo bay opened silently, and the survivors floated across the gap in emergency suits. The whole operation took less than 5 minutes. "Next. Group is on a Thorkin cruiser about 2 kilometers away," Lisa Brooks reported. "But there are 3 Devourer patrol ships in the area. Then we wait for them to move," Jake said simply. "We have got time." They rescued survivors from ship after ship, using patience and cunning instead of speed and firepower. The Resilient would drift close to a wreck, collect whoever was still alive, and then disappear back into the debris field before the Devourers noticed anything unusual. After 2 hours, they had rescued over 100 Coalition personnel from 6 different species. The cargo hold was crowded with aliens who could not believe they were still alive. "Sir," Amy Carter said quietly, "we have got a problem. The Devourers are starting to move the larger pieces of wreckage. I think they are clearing the battlefield." Jake realized she was right. The machine ships were using tractor beams to pull the biggest chunks of destroyed vessels toward the hive ship. Soon there would be nowhere left to hide. "How many survivor groups are left?" he asked. Paul Martinez checked his communications display. 43 people spread across 4 ships, sir. But they are all in areas the Devourers are clearing right now. Jake made a decision that would have seemed insane to any trained military officer. "We are going to get them all. Then we are going to kill that hive ship." "Sir," Carter looked up from her tactical display with wide eyes, "that hive ship is 3 kilometers long and covered in weapons we do not even have names for. We are a converted cargo hauler with hull patches and guns that were old when my grandfather was born." "Exactly," Jake replied. "They will never see us coming." The alien survivors in the cargo hold were arguing among themselves about what to do next. Most of them wanted to find a way to escape the system and report back to their governments. A few were talking about making a final heroic charge against the hive ship. Jake walked back to where they were gathered and listened to their debate for a few minutes. Then he cleared his throat and got their attention. "I know you all think this is hopeless," he said calmly. "Your advanced ships with their perfect technology could not win this fight. But you are thinking about this the wrong way." A Zephyrian officer's crystal body flickered with what Jake had learned was their version of anger. "What could a primitive human vessel accomplish that our fleets could not?" "Your fleets fought like they were supposed to," Jake explained. "You followed the rules of warfare that every civilization in the galaxy teaches. You used coordinated attacks, advanced weapons, and logical tactics. The Devourers were ready for all of that." He paused and looked around at the alien faces staring at him. "But humans never had the luxury of fighting fair. We learned warfare by fighting pirates in asteroid fields and corporate armies in mining systems. We learned to use whatever we could find and to never give up, even when everything looked hopeless." A Thorkin captain slammed his fist against the wall. "Fine words, human. But what is your plan?" Jake smiled again, and this time several aliens actually stepped backward. There was something in that smile that spoke of dangerous ideas and desperate chances. "We are going to sneak inside that hive ship and blow it up from the inside," he said simply. "And we are going to do it with a cargo hold full of antimatter and a crew that is too stupid to know when to quit." The cargo hold of the Resilient had been turned into a meeting room filled with alien officers from 6 different species. Jake stood in front of a makeshift table while dozens of eyes stared at him with expressions ranging from hope to complete disbelief. Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian fleet was a being made of living crystal whose body glowed with anger. "This is madness, human. Your primitive vessel cannot possibly damage that hive ship. We should focus on finding a way to escape this system." Captain Mordak of the Thorkin cruiser Bloodhammer was a massive alien who looked like he could tear through steel with his bare hands. "The crystal being speaks truth. Our combined fleets have failed completely. What can one broken human cargo ship hope to accomplish?" Jake spread out technical drawings on the table that his crew had put together by scanning the Devour hive ship. "You are all thinking like generals planning a normal war. But this is not normal, and I am not a general. I am a freight hauler who learned to fight by moving cargo through pirate systems and corporate war zones." Lieutenant Amy Carter stepped forward and activated a holographic display showing the inside of the hive ship. The Devourers built their vessel like a fortress. Massive armor plating, backup systems for everything, and enough firepower to destroy a planet. But look at this section deep in the core. She highlighted an area buried in the center of the enormous ship. Their power distribution network has a single main junction. Everything runs through this one point. It is heavily protected and shielded, but it is still just one weak spot. "Impossible to reach," said Commander Veltar with a sound like breaking glass. "The approach corridors are too narrow for any ship larger than a fighter craft. The defensive fire would destroy anything that tried to get close. Good thing we are not much bigger than a fighter," Jake said with a grin that made several aliens take a step backward. Chief Engineer Ron Kelly pulled up the Resilience technical specifications on another display. "She may not look like much, but she is small, tough, and built to squeeze through spaces that would crush a proper warship. We have been flying through asteroid fields and industrial complexes for 15 years. Tight spaces are what we do best." Navigator Lisa Brooks added her own analysis to the discussion. "I have plotted 17 different routes through the hive ship's internal structure. Most of them are suicide missions, but 3 might actually work if we time everything perfectly and get very lucky." "And then what?" demanded Captain Mordak. "Even if you somehow reach this power junction, your ancient weapons cannot penetrate the shielding around it." Jake's smile turned predatory. "Who said anything about using weapons?" He gestured to Ron Kelly, who activated another display showing the Resilience cargo manifest. "We are still carrying our last freight delivery. 20 tons of industrial grade antimatter containment units that were supposed to go to the Kepler mining colonies after this military operation." The aliens stared in shock. Antimatter was heavily regulated throughout the galaxy because of its incredible destructive potential. Most ships were not even allowed to carry small amounts of it. "You are completely insane," whispered an XRA officer whose tentacles were turning pale with fear. "If those containment fields fail during transport... If we do this right, the containment fields will fail exactly when and where we want them." "Teo," Jake replied calmly. "We rammed the Resilience straight into the power junction, set the antimatter containers to breach in a timed sequence, and create a chain reaction that tears the hive ship apart from the inside out." "That is a suicide mission," Commander Veltar stated flatly. "Not if we do it right," Amy Carter said quickly. "We have been working on modifications to our escape pods. Show them, Ron." Chief Engineer Kelly activated a final display showing the Resilience lifeboats. "We have been upgrading our evacuation systems with parts we salvaged from the wreckage around us. If we time the evacuation perfectly, we can get the entire crew clear in the 30 seconds between impact and detonation. The alien officers looked at each other and began communicating in ways that humans could not understand. Some species used chemical signals, others used light patterns, and a few seemed to share thoughts directly. Finally, Captain Mordak spoke for the entire group. This plan violates every principle of sound military strategy that has been developed over thousands of years. It relies completely on split-second timing, equipment held together with hope and spare parts, and pure blind luck. Exactly, Jake nodded with satisfaction. That is why it might actually work. The Devourers have been fighting civilized military forces for who knows how long. They have learned to counter every standard tactic and strategy, but they have never fought anyone crazy enough to try something like this. A young Velinari officer raised one of his forearms. But Commander, even if this insane plan succeeds, you will still be dead. The antimatter explosion will vaporize everything within 50 kilometers of the detonation point. Maybe, Jake admitted. But if we do nothing, everyone in this system dies anyway. And then the Devourers move on to the next system, and the next one after that. Someone has to make a stand somewhere. Lisa Brooks looked up from her navigation console. Sir, I have been running calculations on the escape pod modifications. If we launch at exactly the right moment and use the explosion's shockwave to boost our speed, we might actually survive this. How big a might are we talking about? Asked Amy Carter. About 30% chance, Lisa replied honestly. The cargo hold fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. 30% was not good odds, but it was better than the 0% chance they had if they did nothing. Captain Mordak was the first to break the silence. I have fought in 17 major battles across 4 different wars. I have seen brave warriors charge into hopeless situations for the honor of their people. But I have never seen anyone plan something this completely insane with such calm determination. That is because you have never met humans before, Jake said simply. We have a saying on Earth. When the situation is impossible and the odds are hopeless, that is when humans do their best work. Commander Veltar's crystal body flickered with what might have been respect. If you attempt this mad plan, what do you need from us survivors? A distraction, Amy Carter answered. Every functional ship and weapon system we rescued needs to attack the hive ship's external defenses at the exact moment we make our approach. The Devourers have to be looking outward when we slip inside. You are asking us to sacrifice the last ships we have left, said the Nexari officer. I am asking you to give us 30 seconds, Jake replied. 30 seconds to save everyone in this galaxy from being turned into machine food. The alien officers looked at each other again, but this time their communication was faster and more urgent. When they turned back to Jake, Captain Mordak spoke for all of them. We will do it, human. Not because we think you can succeed, but because doing something is better than dying like helpless prey animals. Jake nodded grimly. Then we better get started. We have a hive ship to kill. The final approach to the Devour hive ship was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Jake had convinced every surviving coalition crew to create the biggest distraction they could manage. Every functional weapon, every working ship, and every desperate alien warrior would attack the hive ship's outer defenses while the Resilient slipped inside like a knife between ribs. Entering the breach now, reported Navigator Lisa Brooks, her hand steady on the controls despite the massive alien structure looming around them. The Resilient scraped through a gap in the hive ship's hull that would have been impossible for any proper military vessel to navigate. The inside of the Devourer ship was a nightmare of mechanical corridors and pulsing energy lines. Emergency. Lighting cast strange shadows as the human ship threaded her way deeper into the alien structure, following pathways that seemed designed for machines rather than any living crew. Contact ahead, announced Lieutenant Amy Carter in a tight voice. "Devourer patrol units moving to intercept us. How long until we reach the power junction?" Jake asked. 90 seconds at current speed," Lisa replied without taking her eyes off the maze of corridors ahead of them. The first Devourer interceptors appeared like metal wasps, firing energy weapons that left scorch marks across the Resilience already. Damaged hull. Jake felt the ship shake under the impact, but Chief Engineer Ron Kelly's armor modifications held together. "Paul, signal the distraction teams. Tell them we need 30 more seconds of chaos out there." Communications Officer Paul. Martinez nodded grimly. "All external teams acknowledged, sir. They are throwing everything they have left at the outer defenses." Through the tactical display, Jake could see the desperate battle raging outside the hive ship. The surviving coalition vessels were sacrificing themselves against the Devourer defenses with suicidal determination. Zephyrian ships burned like dying stars as they rammed weapon emplacements. Thorkin vessels used their last ammunition in point-blank attacks. Nexari shield ships threw themselves between the hive ship's guns and their weaker allies. "There it is," breathed Amy Carter. "The power junction, dead ahead." The chamber that housed the Devourer hive ship's main power distribution was enormous beyond human understanding. Energy conduits as thick as subway tunnels pulsed with the stolen life force of consumed worlds. At the center sat the junction itself, a crystalline structure that channeled unimaginable power throughout the entire ship. "All hands, abandon ship," Jake announced over the intercom. "Repeat, all hands to the escape pods. We have 15 seconds before impact." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had drilled this evacuation dozens of times during their approach through the hive ship. Amy Carter was the first to reach her escape pod, followed by Lisa Brooks and Paul Martinez. Chief Engineer Ron Kelly took one last look at his engine room before sealing himself into his own pod. Jake was the last to leave, setting the final collision course and activating the antimatter containment breach sequence. As he climbed into his escape pod, he took one final look at the bridge that had been his home for 8 years. "Thank you, old girl," he whispered to the Resilient. "You were the best ship a captain could ask for." His escape pod ejected from the ship's hull just as the Resilient drove herself like a spear into the heart of the Devourer power junction. For a moment that seemed to last forever, time stood still as the battered cargo hauler disappeared into the crystalline matrix. Then the antimatter detonated. The explosion raced through the hive ship's power grid like lightning through copper wire, following every conduit and circuit. Secondary explosions bloomed throughout the massive structure as containment fields failed and weapon systems overloaded. The ship that had seemed indestructible began tearing itself apart from within. Jake's escape pod was caught in the shock wave and thrown through space like a leaf in a hurricane. He felt his consciousness fading as the G-forces tried to turn him into paste against the pod's walls. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the Devourer hive ship folding in on itself like a collapsing star. When he woke up, Jake found himself in the medical bay of a Thorkin rescue ship. Captain Mordak was standing beside his bed with an expression that might have been respect on his alien features. "Commander Harrison, you have been unconscious for 6 hours. Your escape pod was retrieved along with those of your crew. All of you survived." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his entire body. "The hive ship?" "Completely destroyed," Captain Mordak replied with satisfaction. "The antimatter chain reaction you created tore it apart from the inside. The smaller Devourer vessels fled the system when their command ship was destroyed." Over the next few hours, Jake learned the full scope of what they had accomplished. The destruction of the hive ship had not only saved the Erebus system, but it also dealt a crippling blow to the entire Devourer fleet. Without their primary construction facility, the machine race could not replace their losses fast enough to continue their galactic conquest. Admiral Kekstar, rescued from his crippled flagship, visited Jake in the medical bay 3 days later. The insectoid alien who had once mocked the human contribution to the fleet now approached with what could only be described as reverence. "Commander Harrison, your actions have saved not just this fleet, but potentially every inhabited world in the galaxy. The Coalition owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." "We did not do it for payment," Jake replied simply. "We did it because someone had to, and we were the only ones crazy enough to try." The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had accomplished what the most advanced civilizations could not. They had proven that sometimes courage and determination mattered more than advanced technology or superior firepower. When the surviving Coalition ships finally returned to their home systems, they carried with them a new understanding of their human allies. The Resilient was gone, her sacrifice remembered in songs and stories across a dozen worlds. But her crew had earned something far more valuable than fame. They had earned the respect of the galaxy. Jake stood on the observation deck of the Thorkin ship that was carrying him home to Earth, looking out at the stars and thinking about the future. Somewhere out there, humanity was building new ships and training new crews. The next time an alien species looked at a human vessel and saw weakness, they would remember the story of the Resilient. They would remember that humans had been given the weakest ship in the fleet, but they had used it to conquer something far more important than territory or resources. They had conquered fear itself, and in doing so, had secured humanity's place among the stars forever. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating humans. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the weakest ship carries the strongest crew.